Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another random review. Today's random review is from 1937, and it's True Confession, starring Carole Lombard and Fred McMurray. This is in the Carole Lombard Glamour Collection DVD set that I have. Not currently on Blu-ray, even though hopefully Kino Lorber might be releasing a Carole Lombard Volume 3, and that would be well worth putting in. This was made the same year as Nothing Sacred, which is another classic Carole Lombard. This one was based on a French play, Mon Crime, or My Crime, directed by Wesley Ruggles, who directed about 85 films in his long career from the 20s onwards. And this is the definition of screwball. Now, according to Peter Bogdanovich, screwball came from Carole Lombard's performance in My Man Godfrey. That's where the term was coined even, from her performance in My Man Godfrey. And this one is the very definition of screwball. I'm surprised it's not actually talked about more, but then I hadn't seen it until fairly recently. And I wouldn't want you to get the impression that this was a Carole Lombard channel or anything, but that's just how things worked out. I was talking to a friend of the channel, Roger Kirby, who has his own channel, which I'll put a link in. Go subscribe and watch some of his videos. He does good reviews. About whether I should do another Carole Lombard video, but he kind of persuaded me to, you might as well go ahead and do another Carole Lombard film. So this is True Confession, which is wonderful but completely barking. I know lots of people say, oh, this film's barking, but True Confession is totally barking. We're introduced to Helen and Kenneth Bartlett. Helen is Carole Lombard, of course, and Kenneth Bartlett is Fred McMurray with the moustache. And he's a lawyer, but he's not a very successful lawyer because he refuses to defend anybody who actually is guilty. He'll only defend the innocent. So by implication, there's not that many people who are actually innocent. And Carole Lombard is pretty much a compulsive liar. Her performance in this film is literally tongue-in-cheek, because when she gets an idea, she puts her tongue in her cheek. So she is kind of fed up with Fred McMurray not making enough money, because as usual, films of this time, money is a huge thing. Money and class are pretty much the two big things in American cinema at this point. So she gets a job for $50 a week, I think, to go to this rich man's house, not his office, but go to this rich man's house to be his private secretary, even though she can't type or take shorthand. And once she gets there, obviously she's lied to Fred McMurray about this because she doesn't want him to find out. Again, this goes back to, the woman should stay in the home and shouldn't work, and if your wife is working and has a job, it's somehow demeaning to the man. So she turns up at this rich guy's house, and of course he's only interested in some form of shorthand, but nothing to do with paper. So she fends him off, runs out, but then when she goes back with her friend in tow, they find that he is dead. And then the police turn up, and all the evidence point to her. She happened to be carrying her gun in her bag, just because she has a gun apparently. So she goes to the police. She pleads her innocence because she didn't do it. Obviously Fred McMurray comes to the prison and he's going to defend her because she's innocent, but then he thinks because she's saying she didn't do it, then he's just assuming that she did it, and you should just plead guilty and you've got a better chance of saying, you know, he was making advances to you and all of womankind would have done the same, and that's his platform, and it was self-defense. So again, the tongue goes in the cheek, and then she lies and says she did actually kill him and this is how she did it. So Fred McMurray is then defending her, and she's getting publicity. She's becoming more famous, and Fred McMurray's becoming more famous, all built on this lie. And then a ways into the film, we're introduced to John Barrymore's character, Charlie Jasper, who has a penchant for blowing up balloons and releasing them in the courtroom. John Barrymore's performance in this is literally out of the world. He seems to have wandered in from a completely different film. His hair is like all over the shop. He wears a hat. He reminds me, because one of the reasons I wanted to do this video was actually to ask whether the fox in Pinocchio is actually based on this performance by John Barrymore in True Confession, because he's the double of the fox in Pinocchio. Just the way he walks, he has a cane, I believe. Does he? He might have a cane. And his hair is just, and his performance is just, it's ridiculous. I don't know what the direction was, or whether Barrymore was just allowed to do whatever he liked. And the prop with the balloon, I don't know whether that would be in the play. I haven't read the play, but his performance is the definition of screwball. Lombard's performance is total screwball. Again, she uses physical tics, expressions, and again the tongue in the cheek, and then you can see the little wheels going round in her head as she spouts out another lie. It speaks to her star power, because she is actually a terrible human being in this film. You know, at one point she even like fakes being pregnant just to get her own way. I mean, she's a terrible person, but again, you're still somehow on her side. So the result of the trial, not necessarily going into spoilers, but it's kind of spoilery, but it's not really that much. So essentially she gets acquitted. She's found not guilty. There's a wonderful turn by Porter Hall, again a guy that you might not be familiar with his name, but you'll be familiar with his face, because he always wears little round glasses. He's wonderful as the prosecutor. So she gets off with it, even though she didn't do it in the first place. And she becomes famous. She is paid to, she writes a book, she writes in magazines about, you know, women's lib and how she stood up to this terrible male predator who just wanted her body instead of her typewriting ability. Fred McMurray's character, he becomes a famous lawyer. So we cut to them later and they have this beach house, and they're really successful. And then John Barrymore's character turns up with a revelation. Now again, I'm not going to go into that part of the plot. You're going to have to watch the film to find out how it ends as far as that plot point. Again, John Barrymore turns up, I think he does have a cane, as the fox from Pinocchio. And he is just off the wall as ever. So you've got Barrymore doing all these expressions and wild stuff. You've got Lombard sticking her tongue in her cheek all the time. And Fred McMurray's in the middle, literally playing the straight man between these two kind of wildly orbiting planets around them. It has a wonderful ending, another great last line by Lombard. But again, underneath it, it's about lying. It's about the perversion of justice. It's about how lying actually gets you where you want to get to. Fred McMurray is upset about it, but then he's placated by more of Lombard's lies. So if you took out all the comedy, this could actually be like a grim tragedy and a film about the perversion of justice. But it's actually a light-hearted screwball comedy because of Lombard, and it's a completely wild, strange, odd comedy because of Barrymore. It's a really interesting little film, and again, hopefully it gets a Blu-ray at some point, because I think it should actually be talked about more. Again, it's not perfect, but it's well worth your time. Again, it's available on this Carole Lombard Glamour collection, which has 6 films on it, which so far 4 of them are in the Kino Lorber Blu-ray set. The other one, We're Not Dressing, is kind of a riff on the Admirable Crichton, which has George Burns and Gracie Fields, again wandering in from a completely different film. It's not as good, to be honest, but True Confession is another wonderful Carole Lombard film, even though I'm not biased or anything, honest. Plus you get John Barrymore just being completely John Barrymore. But go watch Pinocchio after you've watched this and get back to me and tell me that the fox in Pinocchio wasn't based on this. So thanks very much for watching. Again, please let me know in the comments below if you've seen True Confession, and again, go visit Roger Kirby's channel and subscribe if you like what you see. And hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews. I'll try not to do too many Carole Lombard films. So this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying cheerio.